Okay, so I need to tell you this story. It's been haunting me for a decade, and I just need to get it off my chest. It's about this seriously messed up trip I took with my friends to a place called the Weeping Woods. Now, before I get into it, I gotta warn you, this story is intense. Like, seriously messed up. It might make you never want to go camping again. But if you're still with me, let's dive in. So, it all started back in college. My friends and I, Jack, Tina, Marcus, and me, we were all obsessed with social sciences, culture, history, myths, religion, the whole shebang. We were looking for a research project, something big and original, you know. Jack, my best friend, suggested we check out the Weeping Woods. He was from Pennsylvania, and he told us all about this creepy legend surrounding the place. Supposedly, anyone who went into the woods came out crying. According to who? I asked him. He shrugged. That's just the legend. As unlikely as it sounds, the tale took hold enough that no one from my town liked to go there. Tina, our resident folklore junkie, was immediately hooked. Come on, guys, she said. We'd get to do a road trip, go camping, and do our research all in one. And I bet no other group is going to research anything as creepy as this. Marcus, our other friend, wasn't so keen on the idea. Spooky stuff wasn't really his thing, but he saw that the rest of us were into it, so he agreed. We packed up Jack's truck with everything we'd need for a 2-week trip. Luckily, his truck was huge, so we had plenty of space for all our gear, food, and recording equipment. Jack and I took turns driving, and the trip to Pennsylvania went by pretty quickly. We mostly just talked about the legend of the Weeping Woods. Jack told us about the Woodwick Walker, this creepy figure who was said to be part of the forest. The rule is, Jack explained, his voice getting serious, don't look at his face. If you see him, don't look up. Close your eyes if you can. If you can't, stare at your feet, nothing else. Dude, you're getting all serious now, Marcus said. Jack cleared his throat. Did I? Sorry. I guess I still get a little freaked out by it, even after all these years. Have you ever been to the Weeping Woods? I asked him. Just to the edge, he admitted. This legend scared the crap out of me as a kid. I grew up in a wooded area, and I'd always imagined seeing him between the trees. If you're so scared of it, what'd you suggest it for our project? I asked, raising an eyebrow. The only way to overcome a fear is to face it, he said. Tina nodded. True enough. I have to admit, the way Jack talked about it, it started to get to me too. Even Tina was a bit more subdued after that, and Marcus was so spooked we thought he might bail on us. But we pressed on. The road twisted and turned, and eventually we reached the edge of the Weeping Woods. It was late autumn, so most of the leaves were gone, and the trees were bare. We drove through Jack's town, which was so small and isolated that it was hard to imagine any place more remote. There was only one diner in the whole town. We stopped there for breakfast, and when we told the waitress what we were up to, she got really serious. You kids promise me one thing, she said in a low voice. You keep your eyes to the ground in those woods. We laughed it off, but she didn't. As we walked back to the truck, Jack said, See, it's a whole thing out here, and you thought this was a good idea. Relax, I said. It's just a legend. Yeah, Jack sighed, climbing into the truck. Get in. We're losing daylight. Just how far do we have to go? I asked. 20, maybe 30 miles, Jack said. No one actually knows how far the Weeping Woods go. The road there is kind of weird. He wasn't kidding. Even the turn onto the road was creepy. The paved highway gave way to a dirt track littered with branches and leaves. The road itself was barely there, twisting and turning in a way that made no sense. We often felt like we were going in circles. The only thing that told us we were still on the road was the line of tall, gnarled trees on either side. After a few minutes, I pointed at the compass on the dashboard. We've turned every which way, but the compass has been pointing northwest the whole time. The road leads northwest into the Weeping Woods, no matter what, Jack said. That doesn't make any sense, Tina said. I told you it'd be weird, didn't I? Jack said, a hint of irritation in his voice. You good, bro? I asked, noticing his tension. Yeah, sorry, he sighed. My bad, guys. This road just gives me the creeps, is all. Just then, we rounded a bend and saw a massive fallen log blocking the road. Perfect, Marcus groaned. Jack cursed under his breath. Hey, no worries, I said. We've got the tools to deal with this. I'll take care of it, Tina said, grabbing her camera. Marcus and I will take some pictures while you guys work. Maybe a video or two. Sounds good, I said, climbing out of the truck. As I stepped out of the truck, the first thing that hit me was the silence. It was this deep, heavy quiet, broken only by the wind rustling through the trees. I felt this weird urge to whisper, like I didn't want to disturb anything. A thick fog had settled over the woods, making it hard to see. I walked to the back of the truck, and Jack joined me. I don't mind handling this myself, I said, gesturing towards the log. He shook his head. Now I'll help. It's all good. I nodded, but honestly, I kind of wished he'd stayed in the truck. He was acting all jumpy and nervous. We grabbed a couple of saws and headed towards the log. It was huge, and some of its branches were tangled up with other trees. What do you think? I asked Jack. We'll saw off the big branches. Then we can tow the log out of the way, he said. I nodded and got to work. The sky was getting darker, even though it was only early afternoon. The sound of our saws seemed to echo through the silent woods. It's weird how it feels like it's almost evening, I said to Jack over the noise of the saw. Yeah, that happens here, he said. Nothing unusual though. Suddenly, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. I turned around, and this pale, skinny leg vanished behind a tree. What? Jack asked. I saw something, I said, pointing towards the tree. I walked over and took a closer look. It was just a twisted tree trunk. It hadn't vanished. It was just hidden in the fog. I felt stupid. I'm an idiot, I said with a nervous laugh. It's nothing. It's hard to see in this fog. Jack kept staring at the woods. You sure? He asked, his voice tense. Yeah, bro, it's nothing, I said, getting back to work. We sawed for another 15 minutes until we could finally tow the log out of the way. We hooked up the tow cable to Jack's truck and pulled the log clear. One sec, Jack said, hopping out to reel in the cable. It's dark, Tina said. Too dark. I looked up. The sky was gray, like it was late evening, even though it was only 1 in the afternoon. Yeah, I muttered. Jack wasn't kidding. This place is weird. It's not too late to turn back, Marcus pleaded. We can pick another project. No way, Tina snapped. We've put too much into this. Besides, the weirder the better, right? I recorded a bit while you guys were out there, she said, lowering her voice. I talked a little about Jack's behavior too. I glared at her. Really? Oh, of course, she said. This little psychological breakdown of his might be the best part of the project. She wasn't wrong, but it still felt weird to be analyzing our friend behind his back. I don't like it, Marcus mumbled. You don't like any of this? Tina shot back. Jack climbed back into the truck. Finally, he said, let's get going. He put the truck in gear, and we set off again. As we drove past the fallen log, I thought I saw another pale limb disappear behind a tree. This time I ignored it. The road seemed to narrow as we went deeper into the woods. The trees on either side leaned in, their branches intertwining overhead, blocking out the sky. The fog got thicker, and the daylight faded even more. "At least the road's staying clear," I said, trying to sound optimistic. Jack turned on the headlights. By then, I couldn't see anything beyond the nearest trees, and honestly, I was kind of relieved. It was easier to focus on the road ahead. "There's a little more to the legend," Jack said after a while. We all looked at him. "The victims of the walker," he explained, "they're said to remain bound to the weeping woods. They're spirits." He glanced at us in the rearview mirror. "Some say they've seen those spirits trying to leave the woods, but they can't. They're trapped." "You unable to move on to the afterlife?" Tina said, her voice hushed. "Something like that," Jack replied. We didn't talk much after that. The rumble of the truck and the deepening darkness lulled us into a strange silence. It was 2:45 p.m. when we reached the end of the road. As the truck rolled into a small clearing, I gasped. "Holy crap, there's a car." Jack looked over. "Yeah," he said, his voice flat. I could hear Tina and Marcus shifting in the backseat trying to get a better look. "Oh God," Marcus whispered. "How common is that?" "Not very," Tina said, her voice tight. Jack cleared his throat. "There's a legend surrounding this place. We aren't the only ones who've braved the weeping woods." I peered into the car. It looked empty. "Probably just someone exploring, like us," I said. "Yeah," Jack agreed, but he didn't sound convinced. "So, this is it then?" Tina asked. "Yeah," Jack said. "Past that tree line, that's the weeping woods." "Looks the same as the rest of these woods," I said, confused. "It's not," Jack replied. "Come on." He got out of the truck and we followed. While the others unloaded the gear, I walked over to the car. It was an old Toyota, rusted and covered in grime. I couldn't see anything through the dirty windows. I wiped away some of the grime and peered inside. There wasn't anything unusual, some junk on the floor, a travel mug, a tote bag, but then I saw a slip of paper on the dashboard. I walked around to get a better look. The paper had a message scrawled on it in all caps. "Gonna no key. Heavy til TL linen itysac." I backed away from the car, a shiver running down my spine. "Guys," I called out. They came over, and I showed them the note. "Oh God," Marcus whispered. "Have people been known to come here to, commit suicide?" Tina asked Jack. Jack shook his head. "Not that I know of." "This person seriously did not come back," Marcus said, his voice trembling. "He could have gotten lost," I offered. We all looked at Jack. He shrugged. "What point do we concede that this forest is actually dangerous?" Marcus asked, throwing his hands up in the air. "You're an academic, Marcus," Tina said. "Do you really believe in the Woodwick Walker?" "I'm not saying that," he retorted. "But legends come from somewhere, don't they? In this case, I'd say the reason is to justify the dangers of this cursed place." Tina frowned, then turned to me. "How are you feeling about all this?" "More curious than scared. At this point," I admitted. "Sorry, Marcus," Tina said, looking at Jack. "And you?" "I want to see this through," Jack said, his voice firm. Marcus groaned for what felt like the 100th time that day. "All right, whatever. Let's go." We shouldered our backpacks and headed into the weeping woods. I was half expecting some supernatural shift the moment we crossed the tree line, but it was anticlimactic. If anything was off, my parents were long asleep. It was the same stuff I'd already noticed, the unnatural silence, the encroaching darkness. and the occasional pale shape disappearing into the gloom. We hiked for a while, Jack marking the trees as we went. How far? Marcus asked after about 30 minutes. However far we want, I guess, Jack answered. There's nowhere specific to go. Once you're in, Tina said. We drove all this way, might as well make it count. No, Marcus argued. We're stopping here. He dropped his bags on the ground. Is this spot okay, Jack? I asked. Good as any, I guess, he replied. Then I'm cool with it, I said. Let's make camp. It was getting dark, so we had to use our flashlights. I set up the tents, Jack gathered firewood, Marcus started cooking, and Tina set up the recording equipment. We didn't talk much. I think we were all feeling the weight of the day and just wanted to relax. Jack managed to get a fire going, despite the damp wood. We pitched our tents in a circle around the fire pit, unfolded our chairs, and settled in. Tina finished setting up the cameras and microphones, and we finally sat down. I checked my phone. It was 4:42 p.m. I looked up and saw a faint gray light filtering through the trees. A breeze rustled the leaves. Do you have any bars? Marcus asked me. I checked my phone again. Nope. Me neither. My reception dropped one bar at a time, starting from the moment we turned onto that road, he said. Told you guys it was going to be weird, Jack mumbled. We talked quietly for a while longer, the stew simmering over the fire. Every so often, one of us would glance nervously over our shoulders. The darkness seemed to be closing in faster than it should have. By the time we finished eating, it was pitch black beyond the circle of trees around our campsite. As we sat there, the wind died down. Instead of rustling leaves and creaking branches, all we could hear was this eerie sighing sound. The darkness felt alive. The shadows beyond the trees seemed to be reaching towards us, but each time they got close, the crackling of the fire would push them back. Of course, I thought I was just imagining things, at the time anyway. That was delicious, Tina said, finishing her stew. Thanks, Marcus, I said. No problem, he replied. Well, Tina continued, it's probably too dark to film anything, and it's too early to sleep. So, I suggest we lean into the whole camping in the woods cliché and tell some ghost stories. I laughed, and so did Jack. Marcus didn't. Hell yeah, I said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. Come on, Marcus, surely you've got a spooky story or two. So we sat around the fire, telling cheesy ghost stories. To our surprise, the scariest story came from Marcus. It was about the haunting of Little Landry, but that's a story for another time. After a couple of hours, we decided to call it a night. We were exhausted from the long drive and the hike, and we needed to be up early to explore the woods. We put out the fire and crawled into our tents. Once I was settled in my sleeping bag, I turned off my flashlight. A little light leaked in from the other tents as my friends got ready for bed, and then they turned off their lights too. I was surrounded by complete darkness. I held my hand in front of my face and couldn't see a thing. Apart from the occasional cough or shuffle from one of my friends, the only sound was the wind sighing through the trees. As creepy as it was, there was something cozy about being bundled up in my sleeping bag, surrounded by nature. Plus, I was exhausted, so I drifted off to sleep pretty quickly. But my sleep was far from peaceful. I tossed and turned, plagued by nightmares I couldn't quite remember. It was like I knew what they were about, but the details were just out of reach. All I knew was that they were dark and disturbing. Then, I woke up to the sound of creaking wood. It sent chills down my spine. I know, we were in a forest, so of course there would be creaking wood. But this was different. This creaking was slow, deliberate, with whispers hidden within it. It felt alive. I sat up in my tent, straining to hear where the sound was coming from. But it was like it was coming from everywhere at once. There was no wind anymore, just the creaking. I wondered if my friends were awake too. Would they believe me if I told them about the sound? I thought about calling out to them, but I was too scared. Images flashed through my mind, my imagination conjuring up terrifying figures to match the creepy sounds. And then I heard it. Jack's voice, barely a whisper. "He's here. Stay in your tents. Don't look at him." The way he said it sent ice through my veins. I froze, holding my breath and squeezing my eyes shut. The creaking got closer. I heard someone shuffling in one of the other tents, and it made me angry. Who the hell was making noise? The whispering within the creaking got louder, and I could almost make out words. Then a blinding light flashed on, so bright I could see it through my eyelids. Instinctively, I opened my eyes and looked up. Through the mesh of my tent, I saw Jack standing there, holding a flashlight. His face was pale, and his breathing was ragged. "Jack," I whispered, "what are you doing?" He raised a hand towards my tent. "Quiet. Close your eyes and be quiet. I'm fine." But his voice told me I had to obey. I closed my eyes again and held my breath. The creaking got even closer. It sounded like it was right outside my tent. I could hear Jack's panicked breathing. I wasn't religious, but I almost started praying. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the creaking stopped. A breeze swept through the campsite, and the oppressive presence was gone. I opened my eyes. Jack was gone too. I scrambled out of my tent. "Jack," I called out. Tina was doing the same. "He's gone," she whispered. Marcus emerged from his tent, his face pale. "Jack," I yelled, my voice echoing through the trees. There was no answer. I picked up his flashlight and swung it around, searching the darkness. Nothing. I pointed the flashlight at the ground, where it had been lying. There was a clear impression in the dirt, but there were no footprints leading away. Tina started laughing. "Oh, this is great. This is absolutely fantastic. What are you talking about?" I asked, scowling at her. "It's a prank, of course. Jack's messing with us," she said, shaking her head. I tried to think clearly, despite my racing heart. After a moment, I nodded. "I guess that's the most logical explanation, Doc." "Are you kidding me?" Marcus whispered. "You both heard the wood, didn't you?" "Yeah, but we're in a forest," I said. "A creepy forest," Tina added. "I bet Jack's got the whole thing recorded. We'll never live this down." "We'll look at the footage," I said to Marcus. "That'll calm your nerves, won't it?" He nodded. Tina grabbed the camera that was pointed at our campsite. I built up the fire again while she reviewed the footage. I glanced at my phone. It was 3:15 a.m. "Ha!" Tina exclaimed. "Told you so." She crouched down between Marcus and me and hit play. We saw a grainy image of our tents, lit only by Jack's flashlight. He was looking around, and for a second, I thought I saw some pale figures in the background, but I dismissed it. The image was too blurry. "Is there audio?" I asked. "Should be," Tina answered. "But why isn't there any sound?" She shrugged. "We must have been imagining things." We watched as Jack suddenly froze. His flashlight pointed at something we couldn't see. Maybe it was off, camera, or maybe he was just messing with us. He set the flashlight down and walked towards whatever he was looking at. "You see," Tina said, pausing the video, "that bastard pranked us?" She stood up and put the camera back on its strap. "Jack, come out already. The prank's done, you win." She called out a few more times, and I even joined in, but there was no answer. You still think this is a prank? Marcus asked, his voice trembling. I looked at him, unsure. Yes, Tina said firmly. Then where the hell is Jack? Marcus asked. Tina looked away. I sighed and stood up. Look, whatever this is, we have to find him. We're in the middle of nowhere, and even if this is a prank, we can't risk him getting lost or hurt. Oh, come on, Marcus groaned. It's a fair. Tina agreed. It's freezing. Let's bundle up, grab some lights, and head out. I'll keep the camera rolling. I'll grab a knife, Marcus said. Tina and I exchanged uneasy glances. To mark the trees, he explained, rolling his eyes, so we can find our way back. Ah, smart, I said. A few minutes, we later set out into the forest, following the direction Jack had gone. We called out his name, but our voices grew less hopeful with each repetition. Our flashlights were useless against the thick darkness. Fear and frustration welled up inside me as I searched through the trees. Jack, I've marked 15 trees, guys, Marcus said. We should really turn back. Okay, I sighed. We'll head back and try a different direction. As we turned around, there was a sharp crack. Tina screamed. What is it? I asked, rushing over to her. She was staring at the ground, one hand on her chest. Oh God, come look, she whispered. Marcus and I hurried over. There was a broken bone lying in Tina's footprint. It's human, she whispered. What? I said, startled. How do you know? Because I studied this in a recent course, she hissed. That is without a doubt a human femur. I grimaced and brushed away the leaves and dirt, revealing more of the skeleton. You don't think Marcus started, his voice trailing off. No, I said, shaking my head. Definitely not. These bones are old. Maybe it's the guy from the car, Tina suggested. Maybe, I murmured, uncovering more of the skeleton. By the time I was done, my parents long asleep, we were looking at a full human skeleton. The hands were folded over the ribcage, and clutched in the bones of one hand was a bundle of sticks. Jesus Christ, Tina muttered, still recording. Let's hurry back, I said, a wave of dread washing over me. Marcus led the way, following his markings on the trees. We were all spooked now, even Tina. When we got back to camp, Marcus immediately started a new fire. Tina paced back and forth, lost in thought. I was restless. We need to head out again, I said. Jack's still out there. Marcus and Tina looked at me. Where would we even look? Tina asked. I don't know, I said. Anywhere. Just pick a direction. I pointed my flashlight in the opposite direction from where Jack had disappeared. As I shone the light through the trees, I gasped. I saw a pair of legs sticking out from behind a tree trunk. I recognized Jack's pants. My heart pounding, I ran towards him. I rounded the tree and found him alive, but something was wrong. He was sitting on the ground, his eyes staring blankly ahead, his arms folded over his chest. In his hands was a bundle of sticks. Jack! I cried. He kneeling beside him. He didn't respond. He didn't even move. Tina, I yelled. Are you all right? What's wrong with him? This must be part of the prank. Tina muttered, her voice shaky. I glared at her. Are you serious? She looked confused. I don't know. You have to get out of here, Marcus said, his voice trembling. But the project, Tina started. Look, I interrupted. We'll come back for the equipment. But right now, we need to get Jack some help. How do we get him back to the truck? Marcus asked. Jack was a big guy. There was no way we could carry him. Let's get him up and see if he'll walk, I said. We pulled him to his feet, and the bundle of sticks fell to the ground. He was limp, his legs dragging. Enough already, Tina shouted, her voice desperate. The joke's over, damn it. All right, Marcus, I said. We'll each take an arm and drag him. Tina, you guide us. Take Jack's flashlight and look for his markings. We need to get to the truck. She did as I asked, but she didn't say a word. She even set down her camera. We set off, dragging Jack through the woods. His legs left deep grooves in the dirt. We were facing away from Tina, so we had to navigate in the dark. The darkness felt like it was closing in on us, seeping into our skin. It was a horrible feeling. The sighing of the wind seemed louder now. I wondered what time it was. Probably 1 or 2 in the morning. A few hours until dawn. Then Marcus screamed. I looked over and saw it. A tall, thin figure with unnaturally long limbs and ropey flesh. It was standing just close enough that I could see it clearly in the dim light. The creature's twisted mouth opened in a silent sigh, and it reached out a long, bony arm towards Marcus and me. We both screamed and started running towards Tina's flashlight. What happened? She gasped, shining the light in our eyes. There's something out there. Marcus shrieked. Run. Was it the Woodwick Walker? I wasn't sure, but we had both looked at it and were still okay, so maybe it wasn't. As we ran through the woods, I kept glancing back, expecting to see the creature chasing us. But instead, the wind suddenly stopped. The rustling leaves and creaking branches fell silent. We froze. I felt a chill run down my spine. Marcus and I exchanged terrified glances. Then we heard it, creaking wood. My heart pounded as the creaking grew louder. Don't look at him, I whispered to my friends. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut. I looked down at Jack. He was still staring blankly upwards. I clapped my hands over his eyes, then closed my own and held my breath. The whispering and the creaking grew louder. I strained to make out the words, but I couldn't. Then Tina spoke and my stomach dropped. This is ridiculous, she yelled. I'm not playing this stupid game anymore, Tina. Quiet, I hissed. She laughed. Look at you two, with your eyes closed. You're grown men. Give me a break. There's nothing. She stopped. There's nothing. Her voice trailed off, but her breathing quickened. I heard a thud, and through my closed eyelids, I saw the light shift. She had dropped the flashlight. A few agonizing moments passed, and then the creaking stopped. When I opened my eyes, Tina was gone. It's over. Marcus, I said quietly. He opened his eyes, tears streaming down his face. We need to leave this place, he rasped. Let's get Jack back to the truck, I said. Then I'll come back and find Tina. Marcus nodded. We started dragging Jack again, stopping every few feet to check our direction. The woods were still pitch black, and I hadn't forgotten about the pale creature. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but we finally made it back to the truck. Oh, thank God, Marcus moaned. Thank God. We shoved Jack into the back seat, and I turned back towards the weeping woods. I'm sorry, Marcus said. I'm not going back. I know, I said. Stay here and watch over Jack. If he gets worse, leave without us. Get him to a hospital. Otherwise, give me a few hours. I'll find Tina and get back. As I stepped back into the woods, I was amazed at my own courage. I guess when you're faced with either facing something terrifying or letting your friends die, the choice becomes easy. But God, I hated it. I felt like I was losing pieces of myself with every step I took back into that awful place. I kept seeing pale limbs at the edge of my vision, and I couldn't tell if they were just branches or actual monsters. But it didn't matter anymore. I was going in, no matter what. I figured I'd find Tina lying somewhere like Jack had been. I remembered that we found Jack right by the spot where he'd vanished, so I retraced our steps, hoping to find Tina. I walked all the way back to our campsite without seeing her. Then I turned around and tried again. It was on the way back that I saw her legs sticking out from behind a tree. I ran over, calling out her name. She was lying there, just like Jack, her eyes blank, her hands folded over her chest, clutching a bundle of sticks. I knew it was useless, but I still tried to wake her up. "Tina, Tina, please say something. Can you hear me?" She didn't respond, didn't even move. I angrily snatched the sticks from her hand. "We're getting out of here," I whispered, lifting her into my arms. Dawn had finally broken, so I left the flashlight behind. As I struggled back towards the truck, the pale creatures were all around me, sighing and reaching for me with their long, bony fingers. I ignored them and kept going. Better this than the walker itself, I thought. And just as the thought crossed my mind, the sighing stopped. The woods fell completely silent. Then I heard it, creaking wood. My heart pounded as the creaking grew louder. This was the third time I'd faced it that night, but the first time alone. And this was the moment that truly broke me. The moment that has haunted me ever since. I fell to my knees, gently laying Tina on the ground. I covered her eyes with my hand. In that moment of terror, I couldn't bring myself to close my own eyes. It felt too vulnerable. So as the creaking got louder, I tilted my head down and stared at the ground. Something deep inside me urged me to look up, to see what was approaching, but I resisted. The whispering and creaking were angry this time, full of hate. I could feel it. Even though I still couldn't make out the words. I didn't look, even when I could sense it right next to me, its breath on my neck. I didn't look as it circled me. I saw one of its legs come into view. It was a limb of both wood and flesh, twisted and broken, oozing sap and blood. The temptation to look up at its face was almost unbearable, but I resisted. The creature started making this new sound, deep in its throat. It was a wet, guttural croaking, a sound that no human should ever hear. I kept my eyes down as it circled me, breathing on me, croaking at me. Seconds felt like hours, and then, finally, it went away. The croaking turned back to angry whispering, and the whispering faded into the creaking of the wood as the walker retreated. When it was finally silent, I picked Tina up and started walking towards the truck. We made it back to the clearing, and Marcus just stared at me in horror as I put Tina in the back seat with Jack. I got in the driver's seat and got the hell out of there. Marcus and I didn't speak a word the whole way to the nearest hospital. The doctors ran all sorts of tests, but they couldn't find anything wrong with Jack and Tina. They said they were in a catatonic state, that they might snap out of it one day, or they might not. To this day, Jack and Tina are in a special care facility. They're still the same, eyes blank, bodies limp. They'd probably be, if it wasn't for one thing. They show a strange interest in sticks and branches. They don't respond to anything else, but if there's a stick nearby, they'll reach for it and clutch it to their chest. As for Marcus and me, well, we never spoke again. I tried to reach out to him a few times, but he ghosted me. I can't say I blame him. What we went through was life-altering. I finished my degree, but I lost my passion for social sciences. I settled for an average job in a town far away from any forest. I even cut down all the trees and bushes around my house. But even now, in my safe little house, far from any woods, I still hear it sometimes. The creaking of wood,